Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance. In this resistance video, sponsored by contribution from Treasure Travel, and here is your story. I want to discuss why full no contact is really the only way to heal from parental narcissistic abuse. Obviously, limited contact and gray rocking are way better than just remaining belly up upon the sacrificial altar. But for sure, only full no contact can bring true peace. I initially thought that I could just gray rock my way to the end with two NPD parents. That seemed like a more civil, socially acceptable approach. I thought I could still progress on my healing journey without having to take the drastic measure of full no contact. Never works. There's no way to half-at it, and you keep trying to find. And by me, I mean, by you, I mean the collective you. You keep trying to find this way of not having to go no contact, of going half contact, of going, limited contact. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. In a nutshell, what I mean by healing journey is my desperate struggle to like myself and have peace. Right, because all of this is just an internal battle within yourself of not wanting to accept the reality. Because what is the reality? You're always fearful, no matter what. You're always fearful of how this is going to reflect. This is just on me. And it's not. About 15 years ago, I told my sister that in order to endure a relationship with our parents, I had to adopt a very defined strategy of dealing with them on the phone. And do you notice how many of your stories all deal with you talking to your sister? And then the whole fucking thing goes awry. This would be an example of stopping the process right where it starts. Because so many of your stories, Treasure, begin with you telling your sister something. You got to recognize the patterns of where is the actual top of this house. When you're standing at the edge of the rabbit hole, you're about to take that first step again down. What is that first step? And for you, it seems to be a lot of times you telling your sister something or trying to get something across to your sister. Because to me, I think you kind of use your sister as kind of a buffer so you can appease your guilt and your own self-esteem issues. So kind of telling her and having her support is telling you this is not on you. But this sister isn't helping you. All she's doing is kicking you into the rabbit hole, which always spirals. And it seems like all your parental spiral stories start with you talking to your sister, telling your sister something. Not all of them, but most of them. I told my sister that in order to endure a relationship with our parents, I had to adopt a very defined strategy of dealing with them on the phone. They live in a different state, so most of the relationship was by phone. I decided that if I called them and found them in a bad mood, I would end the conversation as quickly as possible. If, on the other hand, I called and they were in a good mood, I would proceed to try to have a pleasant but bland conversation with them, and I would enjoy the good Joe and Joanne in that moment. I did not need a plan for when they might call me because the phone really only worked in one direction in the relationship. And we know your sister kind of already tips them off anyway. So again, standing at the edge of the rabbit hole at the top, what's your first step in? And you got to recognize, why am I telling her this? Why? Telling your sister is always your first step into the rabbit hole because that is your appeasement. So you can take that step in. Instead of just walking away from the rabbit hole completely. Well, actually, if they did call, I knew it wasn't going to be pretty, understanding that anything and everything puts both of my parents into a pissy mood. For example, if an appliance malfunctions in their home or is an equivalent to a Greek tragedy, they will be abusive to anyone within earshot, of course, including on the phone, and will send venom pulsating through the wires. Oh, yeah. Nothing can break. In my house, nothing. If it was broken, it was my fault. It was always that was my mother. I mean, and that was all drunky doing that. Okay? My father could understand things break. Things break, whatever, because he broke things. He didn't give a fuck. Buy another one. Like for him, if it was hit, buy another one. He didn't give a fuck like that. My mother would be the fucking crazed one. I've told this story. She blamed me because my father was watering the lawn. It was stupid. Father was watering the lawn, and he would tell her every time when I'm watering the lawn, when you see the hose, don't drive over it because there's a coupling in there. And instead of him putting the coupling somewhere where the tire's not going to roll over, he would. So what does she do? She pulls in the driveway. She rolls over the fucking hose. She breaks the coupling. He's pissed. Whose fault is it? Mine, because I'm in the fucking back seat and I distracted her. And now it's your fault. This happened because you fucking did this in hamburgers. Hope she suffered. Hope she suffered. Hope he suffered. Hope she suffered. So I got that. I get it. In the 6 years leading up to full no contact, I had so much anxiety before dialing them that I would jot down a list of safe default topics on an index card, and I formulated an escape plan prior to dialing. On a number of occasions, when I called and heard a gruff, ominous hello, I chatted for only a minute or two before reaching out the front door and ringing the doorbell and then announcing, "Oh, who could that be? I better get the door. Sorry, I have to go. Nice talking to you. Take care. Bye." Not bad, but at some point, I'm sure that well will run dry. As I said, if I caught them in a decent mood, I would try to have a short, sweet conversation with them per the fake family harmony model. I would avoid disagreeing with them and not react to their digs, and I would listen to them bitch and moan about the neighbors, and I would say, aha, aha. Ironically, this basically sums up the content of their phone conversation when in a good mood. I would avoid telling them our plans because they always criticized everything we did or thought. I learned a long time ago, as soon as I go down, see, as soon as I start talking, I go into one of them fucking drunky things, that hard Jersey accent comes right fucking back. I don't know. I noticed that earlier on in the channel, the earlier videos, that my accent is so because I've done so much to try to, I guess, cover it down here as well. But I talked so much more about my mother back then, and it brought out the fucking crazy Jersey accent. Fucking woman. I was like 6 or 7. I mean, it couldn't have been. Okay. Ironically, this basically sums up the content of their phone conversations when in a good mood. I would avoid telling them our plans because they always criticized everything we did or thought. I learned a long time ago never to tell my parents anything about our travels, and this was because my mom always tried to shame me by suggesting that I and my husband Greg did not deserve a vacation because we still had car payments, or had not finished painting the room, or did not have an organized garage, or I was spending too much of Greg's money, or fill in the blank. Here's an example 16 years back regarding our plans to go to Hawaii that illustrates my parents' Textbook NPD behavior. My mom and dad had called Greg's parents, as they did every once in a blue moon, to say hi. Anyway, on this particular call, Greg's parents casually mentioned that they were looking forward to us visiting them in Kauai and next week. I had not informed my parents about our plans, so apparently that made my parents paranoid. My paranoid parents feel demasked in front of Greg's parents. My ex-in-laws did, and I have to give them credit for this, because believe it or not, I had a very good relation. I mean, there were fucking pains in the asses, and they fucked over my ex-wife by bailing out to South Carolina, but I had, by and large, a pretty decent relationship with them, because they fully understood what fucking narcissistic sociopaths my parents were, especially my father-in-law. I've said this, call my father the greatest salesman he ever saw. So I knew early to tell my in-laws, never tell my parents anything. Anything. Don't talk to them. Don't do it. You can't even go on vacation, man. You can't. And I'm sure you just going with them or them, it just drives the crazy train even worse. I know this to be the case because they immediately called me after ending that call, and they were angry. My dad demanded to know why we didn't tell them our plans. Because fuckwad, I'm an adult. Go fuck yourself. How about that? When Kerry was pregnant, and I've told the story, that Christmas we went down and surprised her mom. Because, she wasn't going to be there for the birth. So we surprised her mom at Christmas time. She was like 4.5, 5 months pregnant. They didn't know. The only one who knew was her brother, who snuck in at like 3 a.m. I had worked so friggin' to put in all my Christmas time so we could bail out on the 23rd. Drove all night, got down there. So we could spend Christmas as a surprise with them. And they loved it. They appreciated it. It wasn't them. My father couldn't handle it. And it snowed while we were down there. And it wasn't supposed to. He's like, and I get a phone. It snowed. It snowed at your house. I'm like, yeah, it snowed like an inch and a half. So what? It's supposed to melt. Well, I went over to your house and tried to use your snowblower, and it wasn't put away correctly. And I'm like, are you fucking lecturing me about my tools? Well, what are you even doing down there anyway? I'm like, and there we go. You're not even allowed. All right, excuse me. I'm not. Not that it matters right now, but it just distracted me. I got knocked offline again. There's technicians working in the area, so that's why I lost my place. So, all right. I was talking about the vacation, and yeah, I mean they go nuts when you try to do anything with your in-laws. I mean, he said that it put them in an awkward position while conversing with Greg's parents. Then don't, and you know what my reply is? Then don't talk to Greg's fucking parents, asshole. You know how many awkward, you know what it was like when I told him they didn't, I had no idea. Yeah, because you're an embarrassing asshole. Because I don't want you to fucking know shit. I'm sure my in-laws did not give it a second thought, but obviously it highlighted from my parents their own detachment to us, and they feared that Greg's parents gleaned that. I said, well, we haven't heard from you in a long time, so that's why it never came up. My mom barked, and I quote, what if an emergency happened and we couldn't reach you? We need to know where you are. I calmly said, you have your cell phone, you have our cell numbers, so obviously you can reach us anywhere, anytime. That really stumped them, and there was a big pause while they struggled to formulate a comeback. A comeback to a conversation that you shouldn't even be fucking having in the first place. Because you shouldn't even be down this rabbit hole. Because you should have walked away from it before you took that first step of telling your sister what your plans are. Your sister is always your first step into the rabbit hole, instead of just turning around and walking away. And now here you are, struggling to formulate they're struggling to formulate a comeback in an argument of a conversation that you shouldn't even be having, that there's none of their fucking business in the first place. Here is the best my mom could do, and I am still quoting. Well, what if your plane went down? I said that it was statistically unlikely, but if our plane plunged into the Pacific, it would not matter in the grand scheme of things if they followed our demise on the news in real time or learned our fate from Greg's parents a few hours later. Like they don't know who's flying on a plane? Believe me, you'll be notified. The airline knows you're there. What do you think? They're not going to tell the family? Oh, yeah, your family members just died on our plane, there's not going to be any type of There was another big pause, and then my dad said, and I quote, well, in the future, you need to keep us in the loop. Keep this in the loop, asshole. And I calmly said, with respect to our interactions with Greg's parents and our trips, you're not in the loop. Exactly. Well, exactly. But when that statement should have been made at the top of the rabbit hole. Silence again on the line. Apparently me putting that out as fact infuriated them so much that they referenced it over the years as evidence that I was evil. Right. Because there's no proving anything to them. There's no silver bullet. You're in the rabbit hole. That's it. Once you're in that rabbit hole, forget about it. Everything obtained in that rabbit hole is to be used forever. And you just keep falling and falling and falling to that, in this bottomless pit. I know now the pertinent terms narcissistic injury and narcissistic rage. As intelligent as my dad is, it never occurred to him that repeatedly criticizing our travel plans would at some point kick them out of the loop. Additionally, he should have had the smarts to suspect that never ever bothering to call his daughter and not showing any interest in his grandchildren would play into that too. Also, it was the case that my parents would give me and my husband the silent treatment from time to time for a duration of 3 to 9 months, starting from the time we got married. We never expected them to call, but during one of these shunning periods, they would be terse and particularly unfriendly to us when we called. I never knew what I had done wrong. They were 100% responsible for the communication gaps during shunning periods, and for the resulting aftershocks of such childish shit. But of course, they did not see it that way. So to summarize, although my parents were the cause of the diminished communications between us, they had the audacity to believe that we had an obligation to call and inform them of all our plans. Yeah, nothing makes sense in the rabbit hole. You're just falling and things are just spiraling. You want order in disorder. The key is don't take the first step into the fucking rabbit hole. Recognizing your first step into the rabbit hole. And your first step into the rabbit hole is usually telling your sister what your plans are. So if you ever find yourself telling your sister your plans about your parents, just say to yourself, why am I telling this bitch this? And why am I about to step into another fucking rabbit hole? After I left home at age 18, I started pulling more and more away from my parents instinctively because interactions with them made me feel bad about myself. I wasn't planning that, it just happened naturally. Once I became a mother, though, I started to realize just how flawed and abusive my parents really were, especially because they were so critical of my parenting and new family and had no genuine loving interest in their grandchildren. There were a number of pivotal abusive events that caused me to strategically lower my contact with my parents over the decades, and I wish I have discussed in letters to this channel. So I would say that my contact level with my parents went through a number of stepwise decreasing levels after age 30, but it wasn't until age 48 that I decided to drop to very low contact. One thing that I realized when I was approaching the zone of low contact around age 44 was that limited interactions were actually hurting me in an exponential versus a linear way. Let me explain the math, and I apologize to the mathematical people who don't need an explanation. On a linear graph, a change in the value on the horizontal x-axis causes a change in the value of the vertical y-axis by a factor of m. So if, for example, the value on the y-axis always goes up twice the value of the x-axis, the graph will be a straight line trending toward the equation is y equals 2 times x. So in such a twofold linear relationship with measure of my anxiety plotted on the y-axis and toxic interaction time plotted the horizontal x-axis, a 10-minute interaction with my toxic parents would result in an anxiety level of 20 and 30-minute interaction would result in anxiety level 60. To make this math explanation clearer, I will assign the units of the y-axis and g, in which the G is 1 unit of grief. If there had been a linear correlation resulting in a reasonable bearable amount of grief for a given dosage of toxic interaction time, then maybe I could have been able to endure low contact for the long haul. No, because low contact, listen, as appreciative as well thought out of your equation is, and I'm going to need you to send me your lunch money. There is no equation. There is no equation. It doesn't exist. That'll let you maintain any level of contact with this type of narcissist. There is none. There is none. There is no equation. I understand you're figuring out. Now what your equation is telling you was what amount of time your time exposed is going to equal amount of this X amount of anxiety levels. What your equation is, the nuts and the bolt of it. So if I spend X amount of time with my parents, it's going to cause this Y level of anxiety. The problem is, okay, I don't think you can put and what happens if they just fuck with you right off the bat? You know, I understand what you're saying in your case. This is how it's working. But all that means is that's how long it's taking your parents to get that long. But if they needed to do it sooner, they would. However, exposure to them was hurting me too much, much greater than could be explained by a linear correlation. It's because you're trying, again, see, here, you're still trying to put some kind of scientific reasoning behind these people, or trying to figure out a way to be around these people. They're vampires. They're vampires. It's that simple. It was more like a 2-minute exposure gave a reading of 4G on the anxiety meter, but a 10-minute exposure gave a reading of 100G, and a 20-minute exposure gave a whopping 400G. Every minute of toxic exposure was generating a more drastic and sharp increase to my grief. Right. Toxic exposure. You don't need a mathematical equation. With anything toxic, the longer you are exposed to it, the worse the effect on you is. That's what toxicity is. See, but you're trying to put a mathematical equation on something that has already been explained by toxicity itself. That's what stepping into the rabbit hole does. But we already know if something's toxic, the longer you're exposed to it, the worse you are. You're just trying to figure out how long. But what you're forgetting is it's fucking toxic. It's going to fucking kill you regardless. You just want to die slower? Every extra minute of toxic exposure was generating a more drastic, sharp increase on my grief. On a graph, the exponentially damaging relationship would plot as an upward hyperbolic curve. The more exposure time, the exponentially more extreme the emotional damage. I'm not actually saying that I autistically tried to plot my grief on graph paper. Kind of does. I am just using the math model in an effort to affirm how seriously I was being affected by them, or just on a limited contact basis. Again, you're still trying to justify yourself. Again, you're still trying to justify yourself. You're still trying to justify yourself. You're still trying to validate. You're still looking for your validation here. You don't need it. You don't need it. You're validated. The equation is y equals x squared, or more specifically to my parental interaction, g equals t squared. Basically, their poison was having a catastrophic negative effect on my happiness and self-esteem, and it was suffocating me. Well, duh. It's poison. You need a graph to figure out don't take poison? This is what the rabbit hole does. Because you're not recognizing your first step into the rabbit hole, telling your sister your plans. I want to point out 4 fundamental things at play here that contributed to why the limited interactions packed such an extreme negative punch. One was that the more I pulled away, the more my self-esteem rose, then the more intolerant I became of their abuse, so the more excruciating each interaction. Secondly, the further I backed away from the abuse, the more clearly I could see how ugly and unfair it was. I finally had to face the fact that no one else in my life has ever treated me as badly as my own mother and father. And you only saw that when you kept your ass out of the fucking rabbit hole. The third thing working against a limited contact relationship in my situation was that my mom's narcissistic supply needs remained a constant. My mom's narcissistic supply needs remained a constant. I noticed that when I called them about once a month, I got X amount of criticism. When I cut back to calling them once every 2 months, she got 2 times the amount of criticism. Right, that was my point at the beginning. Your graph was only valid because of the time you were giving them. If you're giving them less time, they're going to fucking just get in their shots quicker. That's it. When I was down to calling them about every 4 months, she would literally trying to cram four times as much abuse into a single. Yeah, duh. Because she's toxic and it's poison. Because you're in the rabbit hole. And the fourth factor was explained above with regard to the Hawaii trip. The more victims pull away from the narcissist, the more angry the narcissist. Before concluding, I should clarify that although I frequently allude to the idea of full recovery or healing and a real peace and self-love to simplify the discussion, I am under no illusion that I will ever fully heal from parental narcissistic abuse. It is not possible to have a perfect, mature, peaceful, and happy software as an adult because that requires being programmed as a baby and young child by loving, peaceful, supported caregivers. In addition to my lacking some of the quintessential peaceful and trusting software, I also carry some permanent malware. So all I can do is move forward with the rest of my life in a positive and peaceful way. And I couldn't do that with partial contact. You can't make this shit up. Treasure travel. Of course not. Because partial contact is still stepping into the rabbit hole. And the key for you is recognizing your first step into that rabbit hole before you even get to the math equations and the graphs and all that. It's toxic. It's poison. It's obviously, the longer you're around it, the more it's gonna poison you and take you down. Because you're in that rabbit hole. But if you recognize, why am I telling this woman something? And am I about to just jump into another rabbit hole? Oh yeah, I am. Let me walk the other way and avoid the toxicity completely. And there you go. So, send me your lunch money. Thank you again for another contribution and another story. Thank you so much for all your support, Treasure Travel. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any comments or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to contribute for someone else, you'd like to contribute a video for this to someone who can't help and needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you guys. Without you, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see this channel survive and thrive, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.